Belton, Missouri, sits just south of Kansas City, a place where neighborhoods feel familiar, where teenagers walk the same roads to the same schools, and where most families assume the worst thing that could happen is a tornado warning on a spring afternoon. In 2007, this town was home to 17-year-old Cara Kopetsky. She was spunky, direct, and never afraid to say exactly what she thought. If her friends wanted honesty, they came to her first. She changed her hair often, experimented with makeup and styles the way most teenagers do when they are still figuring out who they want to be. She spent hours on the phone with friends she had just seen at school. Her mother, Rhonda, once received a phone bill that ran 40 pages long. Cara kept her bedroom door closed and had climbed in and out of her window so many times after forgetting her house keys that it had become a running joke in the family. In almost every way, she was an ordinary teenager. That is what makes what happened next so hard to sit with. Because ordinary does not mean safe. And familiar does not mean protected. On the morning of May 4, 2007, Cara was at Belton High School. She had a free period just after 9 in the morning, so she left the building. Nothing unusual about that. Students came and went during open periods. The last image captured of her was on the school surveillance camera at 9:19 a.m., walking out. She was not recorded on any camera after that moment. She did not return to her remaining classes. She did not show up for her shift at Popeyes. She did not pick up her paycheck. She missed a job interview at Quick Trip. She did not contact a single person. By just after 5 that evening, her family called the police. Inside her bedroom, everything she would have taken with her if she were planning to go somewhere was still there. Her makeup. Her clothes. Her iPod. A full pack of Marlboro Lights. The hair straighteners she used every single morning. The only thing missing was her phone, a Motorola Razr she practically lived on. But it had not been used since the morning of May 4th. Her debit card was found in her locker at school. There had been no activity on her bank account. A teenage girl does not walk away from her life and leave behind every item she relies on daily. That thought settled into the minds of everyone who knew her, and it never left. The timing of her disappearance could not have been worse for media coverage. That same day, a devastating tornado had torn through Greensburg, Kansas, dominating the news cycle. When Cara's family reached out to local reporters, many were already deployed to Greensburg and reluctant to take on another story. Despite this, the people of Belton stepped in immediately. Cara's MySpace page filled with comments under her photos. Large groups of volunteers walked the streets day and night. Her face appeared on flyers, posters, and anything people could tape her picture to. Over 400 tips eventually came in. More than 100 alleged sightings were reported across the country, from Florida to California, even claims of someone matching her description on a plane and a tram at Disney World. None of them led anywhere. But one detail emerged early that pulled the investigation in a very specific direction. Cara had recently broken up with her boyfriend, 18-year-old Kylr Yust, and he had not taken it well. Their relationship had lasted about 9 months. It started the way many teenage romances do, drawn together by similar styles and music tastes. Kylr was a year older, the lead singer of a band, and carried the kind of confidence that made him magnetic in those circles. But over time, something shifted. Cara's parents noticed their daughter losing her spark, becoming quieter and less like herself the longer she stayed with him. On April 24th, just 10 days before she vanished, Cara posted on social media. She wrote that over the last 9 months she had dedicated her life to Kylr, that she had made no time for friends or family, and that she had forgotten the person she was. She was trying to find that person again. Those words, written by a 17-year-old trying to reclaim herself, carry a weight that only deepens with everything that followed. For days after that post, on April 28th, Cara went to the police. She reported that Kylr had kidnapped her. As she was leaving work, he had forced her into his car and eventually led her out miles away. She filed for an order of protection, and it was served to him on May 1st. In her filing, she listed kidnapping, restraining, and choking. She wrote that the abuse had gotten worse over time and that she was unsure of what he would do next. 3 days after that order was served, she was gone. When questioned, Kylr told a calm, cooperative story. He said he received a missed call from Cara on May 4 around 11 in the morning and tried to call her back, but she did not answer. He said he had been at his grandfather's house and at band practice and had not seen her at all that day. He talked about the pictures of her still on his phone. He said he was worried about her. He mentioned that Cara had once talked about running away to Mexico if she got in trouble at home. In his telling, there were many possible explanations. Many places she might be. He positioned himself as concerned and puzzled, a young man caught in an unfortunate situation simply because of what had happened between them before, not because of anything he had done. But Cara's phone records told a different story. She had called Kylr at 9:13 a.m. on May 4. He called her back at 9:20 a.m. That return call came exactly 1 minute after she was last seen leaving the school. The closeness of that timing to the final confirmed sighting of Cara Kopetsky was impossible to ignore. Weeks became months. Months became years. And the case did not break. If you have ever watched someone's family try to hold on to hope while time pulls everything away from them, you understand how cruel that kind of waiting is. It is not grief exactly, because grief implies an ending. It is something worse. It is suspension. A life frozen on one side, a family unable to move on the other. Rhonda never stopped. She held annual walks of remembrance. She spoke to any camera that would listen. She kept Cara's name alive in every way she could. 3 years in, the community of Cass County was still organizing large search groups most weeks, with the same energy they had brought in the first days. In many missing persons cases, attention fades. Posters fall off poles. News cycles rotate. In Belton, people refused to let that happen. Something about Cara held them. Meanwhile, Kylr Yust moved through the years in a pattern that was impossible to overlook. Drug charges. Traffic violations. Assault. He was estranged from his parents. He had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and post-traumatic stress disorder. He had a history of drug and alcohol abuse that began at 14 with cocaine and escalated to heroin by 16. He was questioned about Cara repeatedly, about the phone records, about the timeline, about all of it. He remained closed off every time. He did admit to forcing her into his car, the incident that led to the protection order. He admitted to grabbing her during arguments. But about where she was or what had happened to her, he gave nothing. Except he did. Just not to the police. Over the years following Cara's disappearance, at least 7 separate people came forward to say that Kylr had admitted to killing her. An ex-girlfriend. A band member. Others in his orbit. The FBI eventually asked one of his girlfriends to wear a wire. During a recorded conversation, she tried to get him to talk about Cara. He was evasive and strange, speaking about spirits and energies, about feeling Cara tap him on his shoulder, about hearing her voice without her saying anything. And then, in a moment that cut through the fog, he said it. He said he killed her. For reasons that still frustrate many people who followed this case, it was not enough to charge him. In 2011, a girlfriend who was 6 months pregnant at the time filed a protection order against Kylr. She described being choked multiple times and punched to prevent her from losing consciousness. She said he had killed her 3 cats. She said he told her he had killed people before, including ex-girlfriends, out of jealousy. He drew a pentagram on her forehead and described bodies hidden in barrels of acid and places where pigs devoured the dead. He received probation. 2 years. He was also charged with animal cruelty. Then theft of tattoo supplies. Traffic violations. Drug trafficking. In November 2013, he was sentenced to 45 months in prison on the drug charges. While locked up, he allegedly confessed again to a cellmate that he had killed Cara. In April 2016, he was released after serving most of his sentence. It had been nearly 10 years since Cara walked out of Belton High School for the last time. And then, barely 5 months after Kylr was released, the pattern repeated in the most horrifying way imaginable. On September 8, 2016, about 10 minutes from where Cara had gone missing, 21-year-old Jessica Runions was at a party with friends. Jessica worked as a pastry chef at a senior living community and had recently been promoted to manager. She was proud of that. She was hoping to go to college and pursue journalism. Her parents described her as hardworking and family-focused, especially close to her 2 younger sisters. She was punctual. She checked in with everyone multiple times a day. The family group chat was always active with photos and messages. Jessica was not the kind of person who disappeared without a word. She was last seen leaving the party with someone familiar, a childhood friend of her boyfriend, the now 28-year-old Kylr Yust. She was supposed to be giving him a ride home. People at the party noticed Kylr had been drinking excessively and seemed agitated and snappy throughout the evening. Jessica did not come home. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Within hours, the police were called. At 2 a.m, her car was found burned in a wooded area miles from anything. Jessica was not with it. Kylr's half-brother, Jessup Carter, told police he had watched Kylr set Jessica's car on fire. He also said Kylr told him he had strangled Jessica before dumping her body in the woods. When police found Kylr, his face was covered in burns. He claimed the injuries came from a burn barrel with aerosol cans that exploded. He said he barely remembered anything because of how much he had been drinking. He was arrested and charged with knowingly burning a vehicle. For Jessica's mother, Jamie, this was the beginning of a nightmare that connected immediately to another family's unresolved agony. When Jamie looked up Kylr Yust's name and found the unsolved case of Cara Kopetsky, she reached out to Rhonda. The 2 mothers formed a bond almost instantly, united by a kind of pain that very few people on Earth can truly understand. They started sharing stories and information, holding each other up through the impossible wait. Searches went on for months. Every weekend, volunteers in reflective vests combed wooded areas and back roads. Jessica's father, John, covered the hallway of their home with maps, working through each grid section methodically. Jamie spoke publicly with a composure that barely concealed the fracture underneath. She said Jessica loved her job, loved her friends, loved her family. There was nothing to explain her absence except that someone had taken her. Then, in April 2017, a man foraging for mushrooms in a rural wooded area south of Kansas City found bones. They did not look like they belonged to an animal. He trusted his instinct and called for help. He was right. The remains were human. The next day, about 20 yards away, a second set of remains was found, including a skull. The medical examiner identified the first set of bones as belonging to Jessica Runions. The second set had been there much longer and needed additional testing. Rhonda said at the time that in her heart, she already knew. For months later, the confirmation came. The second set of remains belonged to Cara Kopetsky. 10 years. 10 years of searching, waiting, hoping, pleading, and refusing to forget. And they had been there in those woods, not far from each other, all along. Kylr Yust was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder and 2 counts of abandonment of a corpse. He pleaded not guilty. The trial would not come quickly. A key witness, Jessup Carter, the half-brother who had cooperated with the investigation and spoken publicly about wanting justice for both families, took his own life in jail before the case went to court. That loss removed one of the strongest witnesses the prosecution had. Then the pandemic hit, delaying everything further. In April 2021, both cases were consolidated and tried together. Kylr chose to testify on his own behalf. On the stand, he acknowledged that both Cara Kopetsky and Jessica Runions were last seen with him. He insisted he did not kill either of them. Instead, he pointed the blame at Jessup Carter, the half-brother who was no longer alive to defend himself. It was the first time in 14 years that he had ever mentioned anyone else in connection with the murders. The prosecution pressed him on that point relentlessly. For over a decade, through countless police interviews, through recorded confessions, through wiretapped conversations, he had never once named his brother. The only name that had ever come out of his mouth in connection with these killings was his own. When asked about the FBI recording in which he confessed to strangling Cara, Kylr claimed he had only said it to fulfill his ex-girlfriend's fantasies. When asked about the burns on his face the night Jessica's car was torched, he said it was the burn barrel, not the car. When confronted with the fact that he was the last person seen with two women who both ended up dead in the same stretch of woods, he called himself unlucky. He said anyone with a brother who was a serial killer would be unlucky too. Some people watching that testimony believed a word of it. Most did not. But the absence of a confirmed cause of death for either woman made a first-degree murder conviction harder to achieve than it should have been. The jury found Kylr Yust guilty of voluntary manslaughter in the death of Cara Kopetsky and second-degree murder in the death of Jessica Runions. A wave of disappointment moved through the courtroom. Rhonda wept. She said she did not feel that justice had truly been served for Cara. The judge imposed the maximum sentence for both convictions. Life in prison for second-degree murder, which in Missouri is held at 30 years, and 15 years for voluntary manslaughter, to run consecutively. A total of 45 years. In 2023, the Missouri Court of Appeals upheld everything. What lingers in a case like this is not the verdict. It is the accumulation. Kylr Yust admitted to killing Cara to at least 7 different people across more than a decade. He choked and terrorized multiple women during that same period. He was arrested and released repeatedly, receiving probation for offenses that most people would consider deeply serious. He served a relatively short sentence on drug charges and was back on the streets within months. And within 5 months of his release, another young woman was dead. If a man walking through the woods that April had not been looking for mushrooms, there is no certainty that Cara or Jessica would have ever been found. There is no certainty Kylr would have been charged with anything beyond burning a car. That is the thought that stays. Not whether the system failed once, but whether it failed over and over again, each failure opening a door to the next. Cara's younger brother, Thomas, was 8 years old when she disappeared. In the years that followed, he went through a period of asking strangers for hugs and sitting for long stretches in his sister's room, the room she always joked he was never allowed in. He remembered the time she splashed him with a water bottle and he put ice on her in return. He said he does not have anyone to put water on now. Jessica's sister, Morgan, described the emptiness that grew inside her as time passed without her sister there. Jessica was the person who made her laugh until she could not breathe, the person who drove anywhere to support her, the person who never let her stay sad for long. Morgan lost her best friend, her protector, and her favorite person in the world. Cara's father stopped eating for a while. He lost 20 pounds and threw himself into work to keep his mind from wandering and his eyes from watering. Jamie and Rhonda, the 2 mothers who found each other through the worst possible circumstance, remained close long after the trial ended. Jamie said that people do not really know what it is like to have a missing child. She said they became a family because the girls and something larger than them brought them together, and that they would not have survived it without each other. There are people who carry danger so openly that everyone around them can see it, and yet nothing stops them. Kylr Yust told people what he had done. He told girlfriends. He told cellmates. He told his own half-brother. He described it on a recorded wire. He even seemed to enjoy the weight of it, the way it gave him power in conversations, the way it made people afraid. And still, for years, nothing happened. That gap between what was known and what was acted upon is the kind of failure that does not belong to any single person or any single institution. It belongs to a pattern, one that repeats in case after case, where a violent man is given chance after chance while the people around him absorb the consequences. Cara Kopetsky was 17 years old when she walked out of Belton High School on a spring morning in 2007. She had just started to reclaim herself. She had just written publicly about finding the person she used to be. She had just taken the brave and difficult step of naming what was being done to her and asking for protection. She did everything a young person is told to do when they are in danger. She spoke up. She filed the paperwork. She tried to move forward. Jessica Runions was 21, proud of her promotion, looking ahead to college, close to her family, and simply giving someone a ride home from a party. She did nothing that should have put her in harm's way. She was kind to the wrong person on the wrong night, and that was enough. Both of them ended up in the same woods, found by a stranger looking for something else entirely. Two young women whose lives overlapped only because one man was allowed to remain free long enough to take both of them. The families they left behind carry that truth every single day. And the question that remains, the one that has no comfortable answer, is how many chances a person like that deserves before the people around him stop paying the price.